Today, we're going to talk about Kase's new 85 1.4 millimeter prime lens for Nikon
and Sony.
Well, hey everybody, it's Hudson.
And Rick?
And we've both been having a lot of fun with the new little lens that Kase, our favorite filter maker, has come out with, originally for Sony.
Yep.
And now for Nikon. And they're selling it out, and it is a nice, lightweight, really beautiful, high quality prime.
85 millimeter 1.4.
And you've been shooting with it
Since February.
Since
I
February.
had it in the Death Valley. I had a prototype in the Death Valley and Joshua Tree workshops.
Right.
And it was pretty much the only lens that was on one of my cameras for the entire time.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of blown away by the sharpness of it. I mean, it's a wonderful portrait lens.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful portrait lens. But I did panos with it. I did the Zabriskie point pano, a multi-row pano.
Right.
And it's a lovely lens, and it's really nice. I mean, for a 1.4 lens, it is light.
Yeah, it is really light and small, and I've been really impressed with it. I got mine right before the trip to New York for my wife's parents' birthday party, and was in Manhattan with the kids and the family, and ran around photographing with it, and was really, really impressed. And then we've had them here on our Mount Rainier National Park workshop, and I was actually up behind Paradise Lodge and encountered this little young buck wandering through a field of flowers, and it was just the perfect distance from me. And I'm impressed with this little lens. I've been impressed with a lot of the aftermarket primes for Nikon that Viltrox has been doing lately, and it's fun to see Kase get in the game. It's an obvious choice for them because they're such a great glass maker. I mean, they've been making our filters of choice. So I thought we'd run through, probably I'll bounce back to the studio and go through some images that Rick and I have captured with this lens, talk a little bit about its qualities. You can run over and grab this off Amazon. It's also at B&H. I'll put links to that in this video's full description. And you can always see all the gear that we use and recommend at my links page right here, which helps us out. So let's check out some images. All right, well, here I am back in the studio, and I've got a number of images, both from the Sony and the Nikon version of this nice little 85 1.4 from Kase. You can see that the Sony images are coated purple. They're color-coded purple from Rick's A7R5. And the Nikon version of the lens, the Z version of the lens, is not just not color coded at all. So that'll help you tell one from another. All right, so I'm going to jump in and just showcase what I really like about this lens. So as Rick said, he had it on his camera throughout Death Valley and Joshua Tree this winter, and was shooting a ton. You can tell that the Rick images have Rick at the beginning here, and this is a Sony shot. So this is off his A7R5. And you can just see, from the very get-go, opening this thing up to 1.4 here at the Doubles Golf Course, low lit image, nice and sharp, even down here when your subject's in the corner, stopping down a little bit for a little more depth of field, making sure you get both eyes, at f1.8, nice and sharp, just kind of impressive for such a small, lightweight little prime. City, here at f2.8. I love the way the background is just gone when you're nice and close. It focuses nice and close. Stopping down a little to 2.8 to get just a little bit more depth of field. These are some really nice shots from Rick. So you got Roger out there working. Here's the crew. Stop down to f4 to kind of get everybody in a little bit of focus on a beautiful morning in the dunes, and John out in the dunes. But then you come back to f1.4, like the shot of Larry, and you can see just how razor sharp his eye that Rick focused on is. But the background goes boom. And one of the things I've noticed as we run through these images that I think you'll notice too is that a lot of these images, and I'll actually open this up so you can see these have all been Sony shots. So you can see in the film strip that we're dealing with the purple shots. And you can see exposure data up here. That a lot of these images, as you run through and look at the really, really shallow depth of field images, the way that it renders the out of focus details wide open is interesting. In some of the same way that Leica has its own interesting character with that 28 Summilux lens that we love on the Q series, and the Voigtlander 51.0 has a real dreamlike quality to its wide open 1.0 out of focus elements. You'll see what I'm talking about with this 85 Kase does the same thing in both the Nikon version and the Sony version. So, here I noticed stopping down to f5.6, like a lot of modern mirrorless lenses, that's just a special razor sharp atmosphere. Looking here from Dante's view, razor sharp aperture, and not atmosphere, aperture. Just razor sharp. This is the Zabriskie Point pano that Rick was referencing, multi-row. Again, he shot it at f5.6. What's one thing Rick and I always do, particularly with our primes, but any lens, is kind of see, what's my sharpest atmosphere, all things being at the same infinity distance, or just wanting to get something razor sharp. No problem with edge-to-edge sharpness, and this pano is just ridiculous at 100% and beautiful. But when you've got a 1.4 lens, why not be shooting it at 1.4? And I often throw a little bit of neutral density, like a 3-stop filter on, to be able to just run with it in broad daylight. But here's Rick just shooting some wide open portraits of us on the workshop. I love this one of Sibby and Pete. We had just a fantastic time. Now we're moving into Joshua Tree. I'm using that f5.6 to make sure that his tree is just razor. Shooting it into the silhouettes of the trees against the ridge line. Details. It gets nice and close. You open it up a bit. He wound up stopping down to 2.8 here just to keep a little bit more of this Joshua Tree detail in focus. And I love that result. And it's starting to get a little bit of dreaminess to it. A bit of vignetting as you open it up, and just kind of a bit of dreaminess. Here's Dave Hancock, and then a panorama of Dave out there in the landscape. And Rick really did a ton of very nice panos with this lens, and it is sharp. I find it to be really it's very sharp throughout its range. It's razor from 4 to 11, and then so interesting opening it up all the way at 1.4. So this was a blue hour shoot we were doing to blend into a Milky Way shoot that we did that night. And here's David working the camera, mainly just lit by the back LCD. And that's the beauty of having a fast prime like a 1.4 like this, hand holding in almost no light. Sarah, the same thing. And here's some of that kind of dreamy out of focus rendering where you get that kind of feeling of almost motion in the bokeh, similar to me to what the 51.0 Voigtlander does. I really love this image of Carl that Rick captured, and again, wide open at f1.4. Another one of his grand panoramas. Just because you have an 85 doesn't mean you can't shoot a landscape in panorama style and just get a ludicrous amount of resolution. Let's have a look at the resolution. 27,000 by 8,000 pixels. You're getting up in the over 200 megapixel range there, putting something together like that. And again, f5.6, look at how sharp, edge to edge, right down to the corners we're looking with this lens. It's so impressive for such a small, lightweight prime. So that was, I was a little bit jealous. I was looking through some of Rick's images. He was saying, wow, this little Kase lens is actually something. And I was, bugging the Kase people, where's my Nikon version? And they kept saying soon. And then right before my family trip to New York for my in-laws' joint birthday party out on Long Island, boom, I get my Nikon version, and found it to also just be a wonderful, wonderful portrait lens, and sharp, wide open. There's my wife Stacy, my son Pike. I love the way it renders this building from. We were on the High Line in Manhattan in the evening. Here's what the building looks like, a little bit more daylight, but still the bokeh is just beautiful and kind of dreamy. And how many 9-year-olds do you see running around with a Q3 in their hand? And if I don't show you this shot, that Pepper was running around with it in her hand too, I'd probably be in trouble with the kiddos. But they were both having a ton of fun with some supervision, shooting with both cameras. And Pike said, let me see the 85, Dad, and took this shot of me, which I think is really nice, wide open, nailed the focus on my eye. I really like the way this thing renders the world at 1.4. It has that kind of dreamy, beautiful character with lots and lots of sharpness. And then again, you stop down 5, 6 to 11, and everything is just razor sharp. A very fun lens to have, picking details out in the street or portraits or in the landscape. It's just, I think 85 is a really, really versatile focal length.
And it's nice to have one that is so light. It just focuses fast. You know, I mean, I ran up ahead and just spun around and snapped a candid of Stacy and the kids wandering the streets of Greenwich Village there. And then we had it just last week. Rick and I were both shooting with our lenses. Carl here, almost wide open. Brad shooting with my 400 TC, kind of an expensive lens potentially. And I told you I ran into this beautiful deer munching flowers up above Paradise. And again, that 1.4 rendering, it just kind of puts it in a dreamy space. Rick shooting here with the Nikon version, doing a little bit of details. It focuses nice and close for these kinds of things. He stopped down a little bit for a little bit more textural context. Shooting the crew out at a dawn shoot that we did early morning. Charlie wide open. I love this shot of him working the Leica in the scene. Brad, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. The crazy dreamlike rendering that it gets at 4 point. Some lenses just have character. This little lens has character. You know, when you open it wide up, which let's face it, that's why we have big, fast glass. The character is just wonderful. It's a wonderful portrait lens. I love the way that the rest of the photographers in the lineup just go to interesting details back here. You can see that 14 to 24 with Kase's hood on there. You know, dawn, out at dawn, fun stuff. Carl, it just begs to be shot wide open 1.4, both for portraits and details. I couldn't help just running around wide open. And I think this image is just exemplary of that dreamlike, almost Dr. Seussian character that it gets to the background. And it may not be everyone's favorite. There are lenses that are clinical and there are lenses that have character. And this lens can be described as clinically sharp, but it also packs a wallop of character. I love it.
All right, so I think you can tell from us running through those images and talking about these two lenses, the Sony and this Nikon version, that Rick and I both were just surprised with how much we like this. And I guess given how wonderful Kase is at producing glass and how amazing their filters are, we shouldn't be so surprised. But for a first sort of jump into lens design, they hit it out of the park, and I'm excited to see what they do next. This thing is small, it's light, it has a ton of character, it's sharp, and it's affordable. $738 for either the Nikon version or the Sony version. I'll put links to those in this video's full description, and they're always over on my website, hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. You can just click right here to run to my website, and I keep all the gear that we use, test, and recommend updated there with links. Those links help us out, so I appreciate it. We'll be doing another office hours soon. We do those Tuesday mornings, 10 a.m. They're always archived up on the website or up on YouTube if you want to go check those out. But you can sign up and join us for a big free photography live get-together with an open Q&A session. You can sign up, leave us a question. We'll get to as many as we can in the next one. And you can always sign up for those over at hudsonhenry.com/office hours, or you can click the link right here. I'm off on a coastal camping trip with my family, scouting for the Brookings Workshop, which is our next one on the southern Oregon coast right near the California border. It's spectacular. So I'm going to go down there with my family, do a little kite surfing, do a little photography, do a little scouting, have some fun, eat some good food. I hope all of you are staying safe, staying creative, and we'll see you next week.